I now invite our chief guest, Dr. Karuna Allanandam, to make his address.
Chairman Venerable Samuel Punnaya, Archdeacon of Jaffna, Mrs. Tanja Puris, Chairperson, CMS Governing Board, Mr. S. Gobinath, Director, Jaffna Academy, Honorable Mr. E. Arnold, my cricket coach and my teacher, Mr. S. K. Mahalingam, clergy, heads of institutions and schools, distinguished guests, old boys, parents, well-wishers, staff, and students of St. John's. My wife Inbam and I are deeply honored and humbled to be here with you today. Thank you, Principal, for your kind words. My thanks also to the musicians, the dancers, the cadets, the scouts, the cubs, the orators, all who have enriched this event and made it so memorable for us. Coming back to St. John's for me is coming home. Thank you, principal, staff, for your wonderful hospitality. You make us feel so much at home here. I grew up in the college compound in the 40s and 50s. And have very happy memories of my childhood and my student days. My family has had connection with St. John's for over 130 years. That's a long time. My grandfather joined St. John's as a student in around 1870. My father and all his brothers and all my brothers and all my cousins were students at St. John's. I studied in the 50s. In a very rich, nurturing environment with excellent teachers who produced some of the best university results examination in the country. I not only learned how to read, write, add, subtract, but also how to live a useful life. Principal, I can never give back to St. John's more than what I have received. To quote Mr. Sivadasan, a distinguished old boy, to have studied at St. John's, and particularly in the 50s, may now deem to be a privilege and a very rare one indeed. Dear students, I can tell you that studying at St. John's continues to be a rare privilege, even now. My congratulations to the principal, the staff, the students for a very successful and a very busy year. As a former cricketer, my special congratulations to the cricket team, the coach, the prefect of games, and all who have contributed to the success of the team. You have done very well, and you must be very proud of your performance. But cricketers and all sportsmen, your challenge is not only to excel in sports, but also in studies. You must strive to be scholar athletes who bring the same discipline and work ethic to studies as much as to sports. I truly find the current state of the school and current accomplishments of the school very remarkable, given that only 2 decades ago, I visited a very different, 2 immigrations, 2 custom checkpoints, and crossed the lagoon after sunset in a kerosene-powered boat. We drove through dark streets from Kulali in a car running on kerosene and arrived in Jaffna late night. Many of you here will remember those days. There was no electricity, no petrol, and other essential items. Jaffna and St. John's was cut off from the rest of the world, deprived of many of the essential items, and had to endure the terror from bombing from the air and shelling from helicopters and artillery, not knowing where they were coming from or where they were going to strike. Yet, I found St. John's was functioning as a safe place for children to learn, to play, and have fellowship. I met Mr. the principal Thanabalan saw determination, grace and hope. In our conversation, he did not dwell on the difficulties around him, but rather talked about his vision for a larger 400-meter grounds. He was envisioning a better school for the children, even in the midst of war, destruction and deprivation. St. John's was a point of light in those dark times. My next visit to St. John's was in early 2002, soon after the declaration of the ceasefire. I was told stories of mass displacement of the whole of Jaffna population to Vanni and other places. In November 1995, the school had to be evacuated and closed. At the end of the displacement, the principal and the staff returned to a school with damaged buildings, overgrown grounds, and new problems, such as an unexploded bomb buried deep somewhere in the grounds. They told me how they got together, cleaned the grounds, the classroom, and restarted the school. Yet, a few years later, despite war and shortages, the school even managed to get that impressive Anandaraja office building constructed aesthetically with the unique stone arrangements to be in harmony with that of the century-old church across it. But of all the stories I heard and of everything I saw, what touched me most were the pictures of students studying while displaced under trees in Kilinochchi. The school had been organized and learning was going on without buildings. St. John's was being faithful even during extreme adversity. I visited and stayed at St. John's every year during the interlude between wars and saw the school steadily progressing. Damaged and bullet-marked buildings were being repaired, new buildings constructed very frugally, with the old door frames and staircases being reused to save money. Children were happily running around and playing on the playground. There was fellowship and order in the midst of political uncertainty and trauma of war. In 2009, at the end of the war, the principal, staff, parents, with the generosity of the old boys and well-wishers, gave hope and a future to 783 displaced, orphaned and impoverished children, some as young as 6 years of age. They were from the internment camps in Vavuniya and from Vanni. This was an unprecedented humanitarian act of faith. St. John's gave these children love, care, and a semblance of normalcy to learn to cope with the trauma they endured. And today, seeing the prize winners and many of these displaced children among the prize winners, and last year seeing the opening bowler of the St. John's cricket team being one of those students, tells me that they too have in return contributed and enriched the life of St. John's. In the Gospel of St. Matthew, Jesus says, "Truly I say unto you, inasmuch as you have done it to one of the least of these my brothers, you have done it to me." St. John's will soon be 200 years old. During its long life, the world has gone through many changes. To be faithful to his visions, the school too has had to change and adapt many times. In recent times, the challenge was to be faithful in the midst of a brutal war, and St. John's, true to his motto, was a light in those dark times. Now, St. John's has to look forward to the future and prepare his students for the future. Broadly speaking, a school has two functions: imparting knowledge and skills, and two, nurturing and developing a child. The concepts, ideas, methods in both these fields are constantly evolving. Let me share some of my perspective on these two as a Jaffna boy now living in California, and also as a pediatrician concerned with child development. A few years back, I met a St. John's old boy who was in California on a scholarship to do a master's degree. He was one of those displaced in 1995. I was curious to find out what a person being displaced would choose to take out of all his belonging when he had to leave his home at a very short notice. This old student of St. John's took all his books. His books were his most precious possessions. He studied while being displaced, obtained admission to the university engineering faculty, finished near the top of his class, won a scholarship to study in the US. He went on to finish his PhD and is now back serving his people. Such stories of persistence, pursuit of knowledge under adversity is the story not only of Johnians but of many Tamils. I have had the privilege of working with Tamil refugees from Sri Lanka living in Tamil Nadu in refugee camps. From among these refugees, there are now university graduates, doctors, IT and engineering professionals. When faced with adversity, the wise choose the only wealth that cannot be stolen or destroyed. Learning and knowledge cannot be stolen or destroyed. It can be used anywhere in the world, as I found out in my life. It was only later in life, as I moved around the world, did I learn to appreciate the immense gift that I had received from St. John's as a student. Dear students, there is no better time than now to acquire the knowledge and skills that can never be destroyed or stolen from you. There never will be a better time for you. Be grateful for the great opportunity to study at St. John's. Make the best use of this time at school. It is a very special and precious time in your life. But being at St. John's and having access to great teachers and books and internet does not equate to acquiring that knowledge. Getting the knowledge requires your commitment and effort, and only you can decide to make that commitment. மாணவர்களே, வாழ்க்கையில் நாங்கள் துன்பங்களையும் நஷ்டங்களையும் சந்திக்கும் போது நாங்கள் சேர்த்து வைத்த பெருச்செல்வம் இலவாக அழிந்து விடுகிறது. ஆனால் கல்வி செல்வமோ அழியாத செல்வம். உலகத்தில் எந்த மூலைக்கு சென்றாலும் கல்வி செல்வம் உங்களையே பின்தொடர்ந்து வரும். இது நான் அனுபவத்தில் கண்ட உண்மை. நான் சென்ட் ஜான்ஸ் கல்லூரியில் மாணவராய் இருந்த காலத்தில் ஆசிரியர்களிடம் பெற்ற கல்வியின் பெருமதியை உணர்ந்திருக்கவில்லை. உலகில் பல இடங்களுக்கு சென்று பல அனுபவங்களை கண்ட பின் தான் என் கல்வியின் அருமையும் மதிப்பையும் நான் அறிந்து கொண்டேன். அன்பான மாணவர்களே, இப்போதைய நேரம் தான் அறிவை பெருக்குவதற்கு அரிய சந்தர்ப்பம். இனிமேல் உங்களுக்கு இத்தகைய வசதிகள் கிடைப்பது அரிது. ஆகவே உங்கள் பாடசாலை நாட்களிலே நன்றியுடனும் ஊக்கமுடனும் பேணுவீர்கள் என நம்புகிறேன். சென்ட் ஜான்ஸ் கல்லூரியில் ஆட்டமிக்க ஆசிரியர்கள் உதவி உங்களுக்கு உண்டு. அரிய புத்தகங்களும் இணையதளத்தின் வசதிகளும் அடைவது கஷ்டமில்லை. ஆனால் எத்தனை வசதிகள் இருந்தாலும் உங்களுடைய உள்ளத்தில் உறுதியும் இடைவிடாத உழைப்பும் முயற்சியும் இருந்தால்தான் உங்களுடைய குறிக்கோளை அடைய முடியும். But knowledge alone is not adequate to succeed in the future. It also requires a well-rounded, developed person. When I was volunteering as a pediatrician in Jaffna in 2004, I saw in the hospital a 10-year-old girl who clearly had psychosomatic illness. Psychosomatic illnesses are illnesses of the body arising from the mind, often due to not being able to handle the stress they have in life. This child's stress stemmed from pressure to excel and obtain a scholarship at the 5th grade examination. The parents were poor farmers affected by war and saw education as the only way out of poverty. This little girl was forced to go to tuition after school, woken up in the early hours of morning and made to study by her mother, who was desperate for the child to get a scholarship. Though I could counsel the mother and explain the reasons for the illness, sadly, I could not offer any viable alternatives for a desperate family. What is the answer to the dilemma? There is no one perfect answer, but one of the elements of the answers in my opinion, is to realize that every child has a unique talent and unique personality traits. St. John's recognizes this. Written on the wall across the office over there are the aims of the school. St. John's aims to holistically nurture body, mind and spirit, to enrich and empower individuals to discover talents, skills and capabilities and enable them to attain their full potential and develop value-based personality. These are aspirational ideals, but achieving them will always be difficult and will always have to be a work in progress. However, St. John's must always be striving to achieve these goals and to continuously try to improve. These ideas and concepts of the aim statement reflects the concepts in child rearing popularized by the American pediatrician Dr. Benjamin Spock. His book Baby and Child Care, published in 1946, revolutionized conventional wisdom on child upbringing. It sold over 50 million copies and was translated into 42 languages, including Tamil. At the time the book was written in 1946, it was accepted that demanding unquestioned obedience, strictly enforcing discipline, and parental distance from the child, especially by the father, was the right way to bring up children. Spock disagreed and argued against this theory. Spock believed in the natural goodness of children. His basic tenets were to let the natural love of a parent to a child flow freely. He advocated telling children that they are essentially good, to recognize and encourage the individuality and uniqueness of every child, and to discipline with words and reason, not fear or corporal punishment. Spock was for discipline, but with reason and words and not by fear. He argued against corporal punishment. There are continuing debates about the merits of corporal punishment in many parts of the world, including here in Jaffna and in Sri Lanka. The argument for corporal punishment in schools is that it is needed to maintain classroom order, that it motivates students to work harder. The other argument is that it fosters respect for elders and teachers, and that it is rooted in our culture. However, if the goal is development of the child and the child's personality, dignity, evidence is that corporal punishment is less effective than other means of disciplining children. Further, there is evidence that many children are harmed by corporal punishment. These are the reasons why corporal punishment is banned or heavily regulated in most parts of the world, including California. Elutharivithavan Irevanavan is a saying that captures the respect for teachers in the Tamil culture. It is deep-rooted and ancient. Teaching to develop a child is a sacred trust and a spiritual endeavor. The spiritual nature or the vocation of teaching was referred to in a talk given by my father, then Principal Reverend J.T. Arlanandam, at a staff retreat on September 13th, 1943. And I would like to read some excerpts from the talk to you today. He said, "The classroom is not the only place where education can be imparted to the boys, and teachers' work is not confined to the classroom. We must remind ourselves of the fact that only a part of the education deals with the conscious mind. Much of the largest part is concerned with the development of our outlook, sympathies, attitudes, sensitivities, and beliefs. All these, for most of the part, exist in the subconscious. One of the tasks of the school is the teaching of certain skills, reading, writing, arithmetic, etc. But teaching of techniques or facts is not the major part of the business of schools. It is with the subconscious mind that they are chiefly concerned. The building of an attitude of life, the imparting of certain standards and values, the dyeing of personalities of students to a certain color. He goes on to say, in a good school, spiritual atmosphere should permeate every activity in the classroom and the playing field alike. It has been said, in a good school, religion and spirituality is the only subject taught and the only subject lived. We teach spirituality all day long. We teach it in arithmetic by accuracy, in language by learning to say what we mean, in history by humanity, in geography by the breadth of mind. We teach it in handicraft through thoroughness. We teach it in astronomy by reverence and teach it in the playground by fair play. We teach it by kindness to animals, by good manners to one another, and by helpfulness to all things. This was said in 1943 and I believe is relevant even now. Every time I returned to California after my many visits to St. John's, I always went back humbled by the resilience, persistence, and hard work of the principal, staff, and students of St. John's. And then I always returned back to St. John's. The school had made progress. It is not going to be any different this time. I have a great sense of optimism of greater accomplishments to come by St. John's. My best wishes to St. John's to be true to our motto and be a light that continues to shine in darkness. Irulil oli pirahasigradu. Lux in tenebris lucet. Thank you.